Mhm. Hello, everyone. Welcome to CCBC's Common Read presentation from Anne Colella-Murray. Anne is a graduate of Geneva College and Westminster College. She has been with the Women's Center of Beaver County for nearly 30 years. She currently supervises the Education and Training Department, providing programs to local hospitals, police departments, schools, colleges, and civic groups. Anne was a former instructor of the Community College of Beaver County and has served on numerous social service boards throughout Beaver County. Anne has said that while she is presenting, if you have a question, simply feel free to ask your question. If you prefer to type your question into the chat box, I'm more than happy to relay your question to Anne. Okay, Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stacy. I also wanted to say I started at CCBC. When I got out of high school, I immediately started at CCBC, and I loved every minute of being there. That being said, I have been with the Women's Center, as Stacy said, for over 30 years, enjoying education and outreach. I certainly have had my share of interaction with being in front of audiences ranging from 2 people to 500 people. So I am really looking forward to the questions that you may have, and really looking forward to answering anything that would make the material that I'm presenting easier for you to understand. I don't require that you wait till the end. I think sometimes when you ask a question while you're thinking about it, it just flows easier for the rest of us, or the rest of the audience as well. So we're going to be talking today about sexual violence. And what I did was I broke sexual violence down into 3 categories. I started with child sexual violence. I moved to teenagers that were involved in sexual violence. And then finally, sexual violence on college campuses. Not to say that we couldn't have moved into the adult world, because we do know that adults are also victims of sexual violence. And to a lot of people's surprise, the elderly population is at risk for sexual assault as well. When we talk about sexual violence, what I want, some of the myths that I want to dispel immediately, I want to make sure that people are very clear that almost none of what we are talking about today involves a stranger as the perpetrator. It almost always, regardless of what age group we're talking about, the perpetrator is somehow known to the victim, and oftentimes very well known to the victim. So that's one thing that I think is really important. I always say, as adults, we do a really good job teaching children about the fear of strangers, and not to go around strangers, and don't take things from strangers. We do a really lousy job preparing them for the possibility that somebody that we know may be the perpetrator of sexual assault to our child. Nobody wants to think that somebody that they know would be possible or capable of hurting their own child. But when we look at the statistics, and we will in a minute, we realize that it's far more likely that they are somebody that the child would know. When we talk about sexual violence, we're talking about a term that is meant to include any type of unwanted sexual contact. It could be rape, it could be incest, it could be sexual harassment, forced participation in pornography, exposure and voyeurism, ritual abuse, and sexual assault. I oftentimes, when I'm out in schools, and I'm talking about middle school to mid-high school, I'm always amazed that young people are so unclear about what sexual violence actually includes. I always ask young people, do you realize that if an adult were to show you pornographic material, that is a form of sexual assault? And they almost always do not know that that is considered a form of sexual abuse, or that it's even illegal for an adult to do that. I also am very clear in telling them at the same time, if you stumble across if you stumble across pornography yourself and you view it, that is not illegal, but for an adult to provide that to you and to show that to you, that is absolutely 100% illegal and 100% a form of sexual assault. A person who is involved in perpetrating sexual assault, they may be using force, threats, or manipulation to keep that person under their control. There's often coercion used in order to keep that person quiet. They oftentimes put the blame on the victim, whether it be an adult victim or child victim. And it really, what that does is it really makes it difficult oftentimes for victims, regardless of their age, to understand that what is happening to them is a form of victimization. They oftentimes, if they're too young, don't understand that that's victimization. And even if they're an older person, may take a lot of responsibility for the victimization that they are involved in. When we talk about what creates an atmosphere where sexual assault and sexual violence is perpetrated, one of the things that we know is that social norms certainly play a role in sexual violence. It's the social norms that we're talking about would include just the idea of a use of power over other people. We certainly cannot turn on the news, regardless of what news we're watching. We're very aware that there is a great amount of abuse of power used in our society, person to person. We know that silence about violence is also what plays into the social norms. When we look at social norms, when we look at college campus sexual assault, 90% of college campus sexual assault goes unreported. So there is a social norm that allows people to believe that this isn't happening because, well, nobody's reporting. It doesn't seem like it's happening. Well, if you look at those numbers, we're talking only 1 out of every 10 sexual assaults on college campuses ever gets reported. So it makes those numbers look very small and looks as though it's not occurring. We also know that we live in a society where we condone violence. Violence is all around us. We see it everywhere. It's not an unusual circumstance, but we were very accustomed to it. We don't have a lot to say about it. We tend to be silent when it comes to what we experience in our community. And then buying into just the toxic masculinity that we oftentimes see through the media that we partake in, we are very silent to what we see. We don't have a lot to say about it. We don't speak out about it. We don't put our money where our mouth is. We continue to buy products that maybe are advertised through a toxic kind of masculinity, but we really don't do anything to say that we're uncomfortable with those kinds of presentations. When we talk about child sexual abuse, most of the time the child victim of sexual violence knows their abuser. I'm going to just share some statistics with you, and I think that they're eye-opening. I think they're concerning. Not one of us should just allow it to go in one ear and out the other, because these relate to people in our families. These relate to people that we know. One thing that I always tell audiences, regardless of whether they're an adult group or a teen group, is we all know people who've been sexually assaulted. And I oftentimes will ask the group, the person who you know who was sexually assaulted, number one, did they know their perpetrator? And almost always they do. And number two, did they seek any kind of justice through the legal system relating to their sexual victimization? And the answer to that is oftentimes no. So not only are people victimized by people that they're very close to, there often is no form of justice that victim receives, long-term or short-term. So when we look at numbers, for child victims, 37% of the time when children are assaulted, they're assaulted by a biological parent. 37% of the time. That's high. We should all hear that. Our ears should perk up. The red flag should be going up at this point. 23% of the time, it's by a non-biological parent, but playing the role of a parent. In other words, a step-parent, a parent's boyfriend or girlfriend, somebody who's living in the house in the role of a parent. So 37% of the time, it's a biological parent. 23% of the time, it's a non-biological parent, but still in a parental role. And then the other 40% of the time, it's including family members and non-family members. Only a small percentage of the time, less than 5% of the time, is a child assaulted by a stranger. So when all that work that we do as adults to teach kids to protect themselves and, don't take candy and don't go close to a stranger's car, that's all good work, but we shouldn't be spending the majority of our time talking about that scenario, and instead be talking to kids about they have a right to say no, they have a right not to have somebody touch them, they have a right to come to a parent if somebody does cross the line. And we also need to educate those around us. When I say those around us, I'm talking about aunts, uncles, grandparents, neighbors, babysitters, that we have educated our children that we allow them to say no. They don't have to sit on somebody's lap. They don't have to be forced into kissing somebody that they don't want to. And I realize as a parent, those are difficult conversations to have with grandparents, aunts, and uncles, but it's a necessary conversation to have. And I think that once we are forthcoming and we talk about why we educate children to allow them to say no, I think that most people are comfortable with the reasoning and most people have an understanding. And if they don't, well, people's feelings are going to have to be hurt. That's the best that I can tell you. Common signs of behaviors among children who have been victimized. There are some very, very common displays of behaviors that children will display that we oftentimes do not notice, we don't pay attention to, for whatever reason, we tend to ignore. Children who are victims of sexual assault almost always have told us in some way about their sexual victimization. When they tell us about their sexual victimization, they don't do it the way we want them to. We want them to come and say, the babysitter touched me on the private parts of my body. That's not the way they do it. Instead, it comes across as, I don't want the babysitter to watch me anymore. I don't want you to go. I don't want to be left here with them. And all of that sounds like a child who's just being stubborn, a child who's being resistant. None of that screams, I've been victimized by this person. Children very, very rarely disclose sexual abuse the way adults think that they will. When I'm doing programs for parents, we do a program, it's called Parents in the Know. And it is to educate parents, grandparents, caregivers to recognize behaviors from adult perpetrators as well as behaviors that children may be displaying that we should be alarmed about. And oftentimes what I hear from parents is, I know my child would come to me and tell me right away if something happened to them. And the reality is, I'm going to give you a statistic here, only less than 1 in 12 children will come to you directly and disclose the first time that they were sexually victimized. Only 1 out of 12 children. So what that tells us is, while all parents and all caregivers tend to think their kid would come to them and disclose very forthcoming, very easily, very vocally, the statistics tell us that's not the case. Again, when we think back to our own experience with others or ourselves who maybe have experienced child victimization ourselves or someone we know, they almost never have gone right after the abuse occurred and disclosed that information to someone. Instead, they hold on to it for a really, really long time. When we look at behaviors that perpetrators, what we should see in perpetrators or somebody who maybe don't have the best intention for a child, you're looking at somebody who's insisting on hugging, kissing, tickling, wrestling, holding a child, even after the child has said, I don't want to participate in this. I don't want to do this. What that means is kids are saying something. They're giving the clues. They're telling us, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. This isn't okay. But for whatever reason, we don't hear that, or we don't take it as though that means something's really happening. Perpetrators are also the person who's offering to babysit kids for free. Any one of us who have kids ourselves, we are not out there offering to babysit for free. We know that watching children is a big responsibility. They're very taxing. It's time consuming, and it's just not something that people offer up for free. Does that mean on occasion somebody might say, well, watch your kids, go ahead and go out and have a good time? Sure, on occasion, but to constantly be saying, I'm willing to babysit for free, not very likely. They often have inappropriate discussions with children that are not age appropriate. So in other words, they're talking to a child who's very young, talking about things that are not appropriate for that age level. They may be showing them things that's inappropriate. They may be talking to them about things that are inappropriate. They may be telling them jokes that are inappropriate. And oftentimes what you'll see is the child withdrawing out of embarrassment. They know that what's being said isn't appropriate, but they don't know what to do with that information. Oftentimes the adult will dress inappropriately in front of the child. We know that they tend to want to socialize with children rather than socializing with people who are adults who are in their own age categories. They buy expensive gifts for a particular child. So in other words, maybe there's 3 or 4 nieces and nephews in the family. They target one child who they tend to buy the gift for. Or they have one child that they ask to go places with them, and the other children are not included in that activity. There's an unusual and pervasive interest in one child, and again, not the other children. Activities, they will create activities that allow them the opportunity to spend time alone with a specific child. What we also know is a common occurrence for a perpetrator is for the perpetrator to silence a child by saying, as long as you're available to me, I won't do anything to your little brother, or I won't do anything to your little sister. So the older child oftentimes is taking on the responsibility, believing that they're protecting the other child in the family, when the reality is oftentimes that when they outgrow this particular child, they move on to a younger child, or they already are involved in the sexual victimization of that child as well. So they may be saying they're not going to do it, but the reality is that they eventually will. As I said, less than 1 in 12 children will disclose immediately, which again, I think that speaks to parents in educating parents and caregivers more than anything, is that we have this false sense of security that our kids are going to come to us right away and tell us if something's wrong. And the reality is that's not what's going to happen. As I said before, when they do disclose, they disclose in pieces, almost like a puzzle. I'm going to give you one piece of the puzzle and I'm going to see how you react. My one piece of the puzzle may be, I don't want to go with Uncle Tony to get ice cream. And what that looks like is, oh, I'm just being stubborn. I want to be with my friends. I want to watch SpongeBob. I don't want to be bothered. But the reality is I'm saying something to you. You're just not hearing what I'm saying. And again, I think what we can be doing to empower children is talking to them about the rights that they have. They have a right not to have to go with somebody. They have a right not to have to kiss somebody. They have a right not to keep secrets that make them feel uncomfortable. One of the things we do with kids, and this could be 4 years of age, when we're out doing a preschool at 4 years of age, we may be talking to children about keeping a secret. Tell me a good secret. How does a good secret make you feel? A good secret, a birthday party, what somebody got somebody for Christmas, what you got your dad for Father's Day. Those are good secrets. They make you feel good. They're exciting. You know that the other person's going to be happy when they receive this gift. Talk about a bad secret. Bad secrets. And we're talking 4 years old. 4 years old, kids know that a bad secret will make their stomach hurt. I've heard them say it makes my stomach hurt. I've heard them say that it's not even my secret. Explaining to a child, that's not your secret, that's somebody else's secret. They know that it makes them feel nervous. They'll use the word nervous. I feel nervous. It makes me feel scared. So even at 4 years old, kids are already having an understanding about the difference between a good secret and a bad secret. Why do kids not disclose? What keeps kids quiet? Fear that the person's going to hurt the adults in their house, the people that they love, the people that they care about. Shame, I'm ashamed of this. If you think back to your own childhood, think about things that were embarrassing in your own childhood. Saying the word but at a certain age is embarrassing. Kids laugh, they giggle, they think that that's funny. To talk about the private parts of their body is very uncomfortable for most children. When we talk about the private parts of the body, we're talking about the parts of the body that are covered by their swimsuit. That's a good way for us as adults to explain to children, these are the private parts of your body, the parts of your body that are covered by a swimsuit. Nobody has a right to touch you on the private parts of your body. Other reasons why kids don't disclose. There's a lot of anger that goes along with sexual victimization. There's sadness that goes along with it. There's a lot of guilt in their own feelings about maybe hating this person, wanting this person to go to jail, wanting this person not to be around. And the most uncomfortable reason that adults really have an uncomfortable level about, not all sexual victimization hurts. And what I mean by that is when you're 5 years old and somebody touches a part of your body that is a private part of your body that responds to that same kind of touch at 25, at 5 years old, that touch may feel good. That doesn't mean it's okay. That doesn't mean it's their fault. That doesn't mean they did anything to allow that. But children will feel a sense of guilt if that touch felt good. So it's our responsibility as adults to try to clarify for them that somebody has still done something to you that's not okay. The adult took advantage of the situation. When we swing into talking about teen victimization and sexual assault, it's really important that we realize that age differences in relationships create an unequal sense of power, which makes true consent in the relationship impossible. In the state of Pennsylvania, anyone under the age of 16 and that's a very important and the other person being 4 or more years older, that's what we call statutory sexual assault, relating strictly to age. The one is under the age of 16 and the other is 4 or more years older. So we could be talking about a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old, but if there's 4 years age between them, 4 calendar years between them, that's statutory sexual assault. Regardless if the 15-year-old has fake ID, lied and said they were older, said it's okay. We also need to always be clear with kids that your parents cannot grant the ability, the parents can't say, oh, I don't care if my child's involved in sexual activity, which some parents don't care. Some parents are perfectly fine with the idea that their 15-year-old is dating a 19-year-old. Parents do not have the ability to provide the green light. They can't say, I'm okay with it. The law is what it is, and anyone under the age of 16 and 4 or more years older, the older person's committing statutory sexual assault. A person in the state of Pennsylvania under the age of 13 cannot give consent to sexual activity. They can't grant consent to anyone under the age of 13. You cannot give consent. So it's important that we educate those who go above 14. Could we have a situation where a 13-year-old and a 13-year-old are involved in sexual activity and they are consenting to sexual activity with each other? I'm not looking to throw anybody in jail in that situation. I'm far more interested in why are two 13-year-olds involved in sexual activity. But as kids are aging away from 13, we need to also inform them, look, if you're involved in a relationship with someone who's under the age of 13, you're committing a sexual assault. So we're not only here to talk about the victimization process, we also want young people to be aware that when there's a gap of age, an age difference, they themselves may be perpetrating sexual assault unknowingly. As we move toward campus sexual assault, 1 in 5 girls, 1 in 16 boys will be assaulted while on a college campus. 1 in 5 girls, 1 in 15 boys. 90% of the time it goes unreported. That's a combined effort of male and female sexual assault victims, 90% of the time. That same 90%, let's jump it up to 90 to 95% of the time. When there's sexual victimization on college campus, it almost always, 90 to 95% of the time, involves alcohol. Alcohol on behalf of the victim, alcohol on behalf of the perpetrator. It's really, really important that we educate young people to know that alcohol is not a free card. I tell kids all the time, you don't run somebody over with your car and say, well, I was under the influence of alcohol, that's what happened. We are absolutely 100% responsible for crimes that we commit while under the influence of alcohol. So it's really important that we're sharing that information with young people, because they'll say, well, what if we're both under the influence? Most likely you both are, but only one of you is committing the crime. More than 50% of college sexual assaults occur during the months of August, September, October, and November. And the reasoning for that is we've got a whole bunch of brand new students on college campuses who are just now probably experimenting with alcohol on a higher level, experimenting with staying out, experimenting with getting a ride from somebody that they don't know. They don't have connections with somebody who's there to say, hey, I'm going to take you home and make sure you arrive safely. We're talking about August, September, October, and November. 50% of all sexual assaults that occur during those first 4 months of college life. I see a question. What are some of the contributing factors? I don't see the question now, so I don't know where it went. If somebody could finish.
It's what are some of the contributing factors to the low report rates in college?
Good question. I think that the same kinds of things that occur with child sexual victimization, the same things that occur with adult, when I say adult meaning 21 and up, I think that there's always a sense of somehow I'm responsible for my victimization. There's a level of embarrassment that goes along. There's a level of my parents are going to make me come back home. There is the likelihood of somebody encountering the first person that they go to may say to them, oh, you don't want to go forward with this. This is not good. you're going to get kicked off of here, you're underage drinking, you were out when you weren't supposed to be. So I think that there's a lot of things that make the victim re-victimized because of things that other people are saying to them. We know that college campuses, no college wants to share information about sexual victimization that occurs on college campus. That's a given. It is not easy to report. When you report, if you're reporting to college security, they don't have the ability to provide the arrest. So that means you have to go off college campus to file, to want to file a report, and people are not often comfortable with even taking that step of going off the campus. What we know is most likely to occur, people will quit and they'll go home. They'll actually drop out of college and go home. That's the more likely scenario than somebody actually following through and filing charges. We also know that it's very important that any victim of sexual assault immediately following their assault needs to be seen medically. They need to go to the hospital. They need to partake in a sexual assault exam. It's a very long and drawn out process. When we go out on call as advocates from the local rape crisis center, we're looking at a 4 to 6 hour process at the hospital advocating for a victim. It's very personal. It's very, people will describe it as being victimized a second time. They're going to talk up to you about your sexual history. They're going to talk to you about venereal disease. They're going to talk to you about pregnancy. They're going to talk to you about partners that you may have had consensual sex with. So people are reluctant to participate in a sexual assault exam because moving forward, they're under a microscope and they're going to be scrutinized. We know that the court system is not kind to sexual assault victims. It's not unusual for, if it ever makes it to the court system, we know that the reality is that somebody's assaulted today in April of 2021, they may not see their day in court for a year to a year and a half. That's a long time to wait for any kind of justice to take place. And for a lot of people, a form of self-preservation is, I'm going to deal with this on my own. And I saw a question come up, and I didn't get to read through it.
Are there options where students can report on campus? I say this because of a lack of transportation. So if they do tell a counselor or someone similar, are there steps available from there?
I actually am going to have to refer that to somebody from your staff. I don't know what's in place on a commuter college. Somebody else maybe can speak to that.
Amanda, thank you.
Hi, yeah, I'm the counselor here at CCBC. Yes, you could refer the student to me and I would help them get the support they need and different options and whatnot. So I would just recommend you directly referring them to me to help them out.
And I think that that's good advice, but I think that we also need to be very aware that that sexual assault exam needs to take place quickly. The time is being lost as we're waiting. We suggest that people get to the hospital 24, 48. The longer that goes on, the less likely that exam, that collection of evidence is available. When people brush their teeth, urinate, take a shower, take a bath, change your clothing, all of that is destroying evidence that's very necessary for a rape exam to take place. So we would want people to be doing that as soon as absolutely possible. Now, your campus is a little bit different in the sense that you are a commuter campus where people are getting there somehow, whereas let's say a campus where there's dorm after dorm after dorm, transportation could really be a serious issue for some people as well. So, Amanda, I think that would you would you connect them with somebody to get them transportation if necessary?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, good. Okay. And
If not, I'd be willing
Amanda,
to take them myself. So.
and Amanda, let me say this to you.
Mhm.
We have the ability here at the Women's Center. You can call out to our helpline. We have the ability to possibly get somebody to the hospital via cab. The cab service here in the county will pick up domestic violence victims, sexual assault victims, and transport them to the hospital, and the cost would be on us.
Oh yeah, don't you worry. You guys are one of my contacts.
Great. That's what I like to hear.
Yep. And I think too, just to add, I think because we are a commuter campus, like you're kind of saying, I think unfortunately too, by the time assault is reported, a lot of times evidence at that point may no longer exist and things like that. But like you said, it definitely is a crucial timeline. So I hear that. So thanks for the reminder to everybody on the call as well about that.
And thank you for being the support there on campus. I think that one of the things that's really important, and in every program that we do involving professionals from other agencies, our on-call system is there because we have advocates on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their job is to go out to schools, hospitals, police departments, and doctors' offices. And obviously, you would fall into the school category as a college. Our job, your job, our job, you guys recognize, hey, we have someone here that is probably not going to reach out for services unless I, as the professional on the other end, reach out for them. And that's exactly what our on-call service is. It's really about one professional, yourselves, reaching out to us so that we can make that connection because we fear that that person's not going to reach out. I know that I've put a lot of focus on the collection of evidence. Well, I also want to be very clear in saying at this time, if somebody chose not to go forward through the court system, that's entirely up to them. We would continue to work with them through advocacy, counseling, support group. We have a 24-hour helpline. So their choice as to whether to file charges or to pursue charges is entirely up to them. I don't want it to sound as though our ability to support them is contingent on filing charges. The other thing that I want to move on to, understanding consent. Consent is all about, that's the key really on college campuses, is to be talking about consent, understanding consent, asking for permission to change the level of sexual activity. That's all part of consent. It's all part of that communication that's necessary. Letting partners know that they have the right to stop at any time. Asking, is what I'm doing okay? Using physical cues to let the other person know of your comfort level. And I think more than anything, we just always want to convey to young people that consent is really about communication. Alcohol hinders communication, as we all know as adults. And we also know that people's level of inhibition is often skewed by alcohol. Consent does not look like refusing to acknowledge the word no. It's not about assuming that a certain clothing, flirting, kissing, flirtation, dancing a certain way, those are not signs to be wanting anything more. They remain within a framework, and just because somebody is dancing a certain way doesn't mean it's a green light for sexual activity. Someone incapable of consent because of drug and alcohol use is exactly that. They're incapable of giving consent. The other person's responsible for realizing that they cannot consent at this point. And finally, assuming that past permission to engage in sexual acts allows you the freedom to move forward at this time is not acceptable. We always want to convey to young people that at any time during sexual activity, They always have the right to say no, and the other person has the responsibility to hear the no. I am already 10 minutes into your question and answer time, so I'd really like to open it up for questions and answers, and you can unmute yourself, you can come in through the chat, whatever's comfortable for you. I also want to convey that if there's anybody who wants more information following the presentation today, I'm more than happy to speak with you on the phone. We have a 24-hour helpline that people can ask questions to a trained counselor that's here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have someone here. There's always someone to reach out to, regardless of when someone's in need. Is there anything I can? Oh, okay, here we go. You guys are the best. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you. We really do. And again, we're all in this together. Anybody who's working with young people, we know, we're experienced to know, all of us here, that a lot of times all they need is pointed in the right direction. We want to be sure that we're there to put them in that direction. We know that making the choices that young people make, in hindsight, we weren't always making the best choices ourselves. So we want to make sure that we remain non-judgmental, and also to be reaching out to agencies that we know are there to assist. I also did want to just point out that we have, at Heritage Valley here in the county, there are 4 what we call SANE nurses. Those are sexual assault nurse examiners. They are specially trained in the collection of evidence for sexual assault victims. Unfortunately, anybody under the age of 13 would be referred to Children's Hospital. We would also provide an advocate to Children's Hospital, but anybody who's brought into Heritage Valley would hopefully be seen by a nurse examiner who's trained in collection of forensic evidence, and who also would be working with an advocate to better assist that victim.
And I have a question.
Yes.
You were giving some statistical information about the number of women that get assaulted as opposed to the number of men that get assaulted. Is that the difference in that number due to underreporting?
I would very comfortably say yes. I think that when women report as low of a rate that they do, I think that men are that much less likely to be reporting their own sexual victimization. What I can tell you, Stacy, is that you that's asking the question?
Yes.
Stacy, one of the things that we know for sure is we know that 1 out of 4 girls, 1 out of 6 boys will experience some form of sexual victimization by the age of 18. What we also know is one of the highest areas of men coming into our center is adult men coming into our center seeking services who were victims of childhood victimization. So even the numbers, when we see adult men coming to us, it's relating to sexual victimization. Not always is it current or even relatively recent, but they're still coming in seeking services.
So what can we do to encourage men to seek the services that they need?
I think that one of the things that's really, really important, and it's very difficult for people to understand, is there is no evidence that supports that sexual assault, male-to-male sexual assault, has anything to do with homosexuality. Male-to-male sexual victimization is about the same thing as it is for male-to-female perpetration. It's about power and control. So we know that it's very important that we get the information out there that someone's sexual preference has nothing to do with the likelihood of them perpetrating. Homosexual individuals are no more likely to perpetrate sexual assault it's actually far more likely that it would be a heterosexual individual. So that's part of, I think, the misunderstanding. I think it's very important that we continue to say that sexual assault is about power and control. It's not about not having a partner. It's not about having urges that can't be controlled. It's about power and control. And it's about degrading and humiliating of another person.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Again, I just want to make myself available. If anybody does have something that comes up down the road, please give us a call. You can certainly ask for me. Obviously, I'm here generally the daylight hours, but there is I'm going to give the helpline number. The helpline number is 24 hours a day. It's 724-775-0131. And there's somebody there available at all times. Again, it's 724-775-0131. And anyone can call that number just to find out what's available, to ask questions, to try to find out what might be helpful for someone they know. It really is there for everybody's use. Stacy, thank you for putting it up, because I know sometimes people need to see it rather than just hear it. And again, we do have a website, Women's Center of Beaver County. People can visit the website, find out what services are available. I think it's important that I also say all of our services are free of charge. So if somebody's concerned about not being able to pay, that is not an issue for people. Should not be thought of as an issue. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you. And again, if anybody has questions upcoming, please reach out to us. Are you guys accepting physical donations at this time? Oh, yes. I'm just going to say yes. Somebody might get mad, but I'm going to say yes. Because of COVID, we were really strict on people coming in and out, but we have lifted some of our restrictions, so I'm going to say yes. But as always, we do not accept donations of clothing. We just simply do not have the room for storing them. Thanks for the service in the county. So lucky to have the Women's Center. Karen, you and I go way, way back. Thank you for everything you've done. Elaine, you as well. I know that you've brought many young people here to see what we do and continue to promote our services through your work, and we really appreciate that.
They have always loved it. They've always loved the information you've provided, and getting to, I don't think they just all really understood what a gem we have right there at the Women's Center there for our county.
I think that this networking that we're doing, just like what we're doing here today, just really speaks to, we want to be able to serve people. You guys encounter people, we provide a service. Maybe that you're going to refer somebody here that we're not the right place. We're going to make sure that they get to the right place. We all are here in social service and as educators to make sure that people get the services that they need. It's just for the betterment of society that people heal from victimization, to become much more productive, better employees, better parents, better members of society. It does all of us good when that occurs.
Absolutely.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions for Anne? Well, Anne, thank you so much for this informative and eye-opening presentation. I really appreciate that you were willing to join us today. Thank you very much.
Anytime. Thank you.